Okay, quiet, please. Please. Okay.
Okay, so you guys should get used to this picture. You're going to see it 5 more times. This picture here is an experiment that is part of this. So first, I'm going to ask the wonderful pink-haired lady in the room to pick which picture applies to her the best.
I'm Iron Man.
That's what I was hoping for. So, number 1, Iron Man. We're going with that is the word R. So I will begin the first part of my speech with the word R. All right, so are there anyone in this room, and I realize this is bad grammar, but I could not put it together in a different way. Are there anybody in this room who remembers the first days when we actually had to give the impromptu speeches? Of those people who remember those days, and those that don't probably aren't paying attention anyway, but those that remember those days, do you remember when I talked about the bunny in the cage? All right. So the bunny in the cage. Once again, imagine you're that bunny in the cage. Except for this time, you didn't do anything wrong. You're not a bunny anymore, you're a human being, but you're still in jail, and all the evidence stacks up against you. That's the bunny in the cage. All right. So the biggest thing that I'm going to start out with, and those of you that don't know, my speech is about different versions of why killing should be legal and things like that. Basically, what I'm going to speak about right now is taking away the power from the people that stand above us and giving the power back to the people that stand here, us. So, first off, I'm going to talk about a little bit of wrongful incarceration. A lot of people don't think that that's something that's very common within the world or the United States, anything like that. Well, in the last 30 years, actually, over 40 people have been discovered to have been released under the thoughts that this is false potential incarceration, or they didn't actually do it. Of those 40 people, I don't remember the exact number, but about 25, somewhere in that vicinity, were actually killed under the pretense that they were in fact guilty of the crime. Now, this may not seem like a huge thing to a lot of people. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there's billions of people on the planet, and a couple 40, 50 people, that doesn't seem that too important to many people. But if you think about it, the whole idea of a justice system, the whole idea of a system in general, is to eliminate things like that, to eliminate problems for people. So when we look at this and we look at thinking, well, maybe it's not too bad that we have this many going wrong when this many are going right. If you think about it, though, those people that have that wrong instance, it tends to actually, if you go to jail, you tend to actually go back to jail because you are not really built for outside society if you've spent a lot of time in that place. So for like third strike instances where the person is dealing in small arms, small drugs, things like that, something that can be rehabilitated, they end up in prison for a long time over that because of the laws that are in place. That person has a lot harder time integrating with people when they get back into regular society. Now just imagine you are that person. You specifically, because you have children. Any of you, imagine you have children. You have family, even if you don't have children, you have parents, things like that. Imagine you are incarcerated wrongly. First off, all of your peers, everyone in this room, doesn't get the whole story. They get the story that the justice system presents them. So everybody around you, all the people you called friends, all your peers, look at you as an evil person now. That's it. It changes. Your family, you go to prison, you don't get to take your children with you. You don't get to take your parents with you, anything like that. You lose that support system, and your children lose that support system. Now the reason that I bring this up brings into the second contention, which I will move back to my original picture, and I will look at this to make sure I know who I am talking to. All right, so back to you, Tamara. Which one of these pictures applies to you the best?
You know I'm the most.
Well, that is the goal. So the next one is normal. Normal situations, or normal justice system, tends to favor the majority more than it favors the minority. Especially in the aspect that the police, things like that, just different justicial groups, will actually tend to follow themselves more than actual law, or follow the other person in the group, the larger portion of the group, rather than their own moral basis. A good example of that is the Rodney King incident. I guarantee you everybody who was involved in that wasn't thinking, I'm going to beat the hell out of this guy. But at the same time, when you're moving with a group, you tend to actually follow that group because you do not want to be ostracized or placed away from that group. So that can actually turn people who are normally great, awesome people into evil people, which becomes a major problem in the aspect that we have built this hierarchical structure so these people can protect us. That's the whole idea of a government, is that these people are here to make sure that our lives are better. But at the same time, we've also built this hierarchical structure allowing those people to make mistakes because they are, in fact, people like the rest of us. One thing that people don't really think about a lot of times is the government isn't made up of automatons that are sitting there making the perfect choice every time. They're human beings just like you and me. 20 years ago, 90%, well, I guess 20 years ago isn't a good reason to say it because the Senate is actually pretty old. So let's go with 40 years ago, those people were sitting in the same room. Probably not this same room, but those people that make all these decisions for you are your peers. They have been placed above us by us. So I'm going to move on to my next contention. That's the behind bars. I forgot to change the picture. I'm not good with these things. All right, so the next one, I'm going to ask you, which picture does apply to you the best? All right, so that's number 3. My word for that is people. So my next topic that I'm going to talk about is the fact that people tend to actually, sorry, I was distracted and I can't do that. I'm sorry. Anyway, people tend to actually change as situations come up. There's something that is referred to as the Lucifer effect. And that is discovered in the 70s by a guy who's doing situational analysis that I'm going to talk about in the next portion. But the Lucifer effect is actually the idea that people will act differently based on situational analysis, based on the people that are around them, and actually the environment that they're in. Someone who might make a choice, a moral choice, saying, well, walking by on the street, picking someone up if they fall, something like that, in a certain situation, might not make that same choice provided they're walking with someone that they consider a little bit less helpful. So to look good to their peer, they might make a different choice. There's also the ideals that if there's a large group of people, just to keep on with the falling on the ground aspect, that if there's a large group of people and they see someone fall, generally people in a large group assume someone else is going to help. This is another instance in which good people have done bad things, and not even necessarily because they're bad people. Moving on to what I was going to talk about with that, where the Lucifer effect idea came from. It's the Stanford, let's see if I got a picture for that, Stanford prison experiment. And what they did in the Stanford prison experiment, this is actually really awesome because they didn't really tell anybody anything. This is the 70s when it was okay to go around without ethics and psychology. So, but basically what they did was and $17 a day, by the way, is what they got paid for this. $17 a day, which at the time was about a day's wages, so it's not that big of a difference. But if you think about what they went through, first off, this guy's a guard right here. They recruited the guards. All they did was they asked them, would you like to be part of an experiment dealing in psychology? That's all they had to ask them at the time. So, yeah, sure, $17 a day, I don't have to go to work today. Heck yeah. So they go ahead, they do that, they get all these people together, they go down, they build a makeshift prison. After they've done so, they come up to these guys. These guys are the ones whose lives suck. This sucks. Anyway, these ones are the ones whose lives sucks. They agreed to do this experiment as well, but they were in class. So imagine you're in class right now. You agreed to do an experiment 2 months ago, probably not going to hear back from them, you're not sure what's going on. All of a sudden the police come in, pick you up, arrest you, and leave the room with no explanation whatsoever. So this is the first stage of the experiment. This shows where the peers are going to have differentiation. Then they actually bring them to the prison. First off, the guards have no instruction. They are not told how to keep care of the prisoners. They are not told what to do. They are only told to keep them in check. The prisoners are not told anything. They just show up, they're put in the cell. That's what they're supposed to do. This is an interesting situation because this actually shows very strongly what good people can change into very quickly, depending on the situation. Even when they are not being rebelled against, the guards actually took to being very aggressive about certain things. This picture right here is an instance where they come out at 2 in the morning. They get everybody out of the jail cells while they were sleeping and put them up against the wall and search them. This is an idea that is used in jails currently today. that is basically just to make sure that we have the power, you don't have the power. Throughout this process, they did try and stage a few rebellions, so the punishments became a little bit more severe at different points in time during this particular experiment. And at one point in time, they actually had to shut the experiment down because they were worried about the experimenters, or the experimentees, my apologies. And that is where the Lucifer effect idea comes from. That is the person who came up with that idea came with that because of this reason. So, we'll move on to the next picture. And then, so we're going to go with Kyle back here. Yep, all right. Oh, so working out so well, by the way. So this is number 4, the word hostile. So hostile environments aren't something that's going to become new to the world. This is something that's already existed in the world. And this is where I'm moving on to the solution portion. Another piece of paper on the ground. The solution portion of my speech. I've already given you a couple reasons why the current status quo is not really working out for people. Because certain people are ending up in situations that they're not belonging in, like I talked about with incarceration, wrongful incarceration at least. And then the second portion I'm talking about how just giving power to people tends to get that power to corruption, tends to make people a little bit more evil inherently. So now I'm going to talk about the solution a little bit. Freedom. The United States is all about freedom. That's what we are. How can we consider ourselves free when we've given a small portion of our peer base the power over us to make these decisions, like imprisoning people, like the death sentence, like whether or not it's okay to go ahead and sue someone, things like that. How can we consider ourselves actually free if someone has the power to say, now you've done something wrong, you're in prison? I don't consider that freedom. What I consider freedom is what the Romans did. And, you know, obviously, the Romans is thousands of years ago. Didn't quite work out, so it's going to need a little bit of work. But what I'm trying to say, though, is everybody was involved in every decision. The Senate had both the upper class and the lower class represented. The Senate not only had that, but they talked to the people on very many occasions in public forums where they could make decisions as far as those things are considered. When someone was put up for the death sentence, it was a public forum as to whether or not that person was to be punished so severely, or even that person was deserving of that punishment. And that's my kind of idea of what should be done. And the reason I say that is because you, me, we know each other. The guy, the judge, he doesn't know me. Your peers in the jury pool, they're specifically made not to know you. Peer as they are called, they are specifically told that if they know you, they need to leave, because that creates cross-references issues. The problem with that, though, is then the people who are adjudicating you have no idea what's really going on. They've only been told the second-hand facts by you and by your accuser. The people who are involved, though, you and me say something wouldn't have happened in this room, like I just attacked Ashlyn for no reason, which I wouldn't do because she's wonderful. But you are the ones who can make that adjudication. Someone who's not part of this involvement has no idea what's going on. A good example of that is just recently there's a cartel in Mexico that's called the Knights Templar cartel. They're a very hard cartel. They're pushing really hard to make sure that they take over the country, essentially. The government has been fighting them for a very long time without any avail. It's really not doing anything for the government. So their last-ditch effort was to allow the militia in Malahuacan. I'm not very good at Mexican or Spanish, or I guess it is technically Mexican because it is a Mexican state. But what they've done is they've taken the, I lost my train of thought, sorry. They've taken the people that actually live there, the militia that was built, the people that are built to protect that state, and actually allowed them to take matters into their own hands and create moral justice for these cartel people. And the reason that this was most effective was because these people are actually getting a first-hand experience of what this cartel is doing. It's not just the military who's paid to go in and try and handle a situation. It's the people whose houses were destroyed last week. It's the people whose crops were destroyed. It's the people whose daughters were taken. These people have a real intense emotion tied to what's really gone on, which can be a problem, but at the same time, those intense emotions are what make up humanity. So how can that really be a problem when we're trying to create a perfect humanity to be more human? So, we'll move on to, this is that militia group right there. They don't want to show their faces. If you can see right here, this guy's wearing a bandana and everything. They were actually supplied arms by the government. So, this last picture here, I'm going to ask you, it's the only one left.
Yeah, it's all the way through.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is because he loves the whole conspiracy theory thing. If you get a chance, talk to Josh about it. It's really wonderful.
If I get a chance, I'm going to be in a class about it.
Except that you've got about 30 seconds to wrap it up because we are at the end of class.
All right, well, basically what I was going to say is, so I would like all of you to consider the ideas that maybe the government we built up isn't the best government, and we should actually work on building a more community-based ideal, not communist-based ideal, keep those words separate, community-based ideal of what the government should be like. This was supposed to be a quote by Dexter Morgan, considering you guys loved him so much. People are so, normal people are so hostile, is what I was trying to get at. The idea is that people are naturally built as hostile people. So if we give the people the ability to enact their own justice on their own, it might actually balance out that issue as well. Thank you.